All right, it is 11:30 and we are ready to get going. We should, I expect we'll have a few more people join in over the next 5-10 minutes, but let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining today's AA Ohio chapter meeting. We are virtual today, as you all know. We'll be going from 11:30 until 1. We may end up finishing just a little bit early. I believe we've had one of our speakers for today drop out, but I am excited to talk to you about information architecture. I think the speaker we have today is an expert in the field of information architecture, and I'm excited for him to share his perspective about where we are and where we're heading when it comes to data and information architecture. So after Greg is done, we're going to spend just a couple of minutes kind of talking about where we're at from a chapter perspective. So please don't drop off when Greg's finished, and we'll kind of go from there. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Harned. Greg, you want to introduce yourself and jump into your presentation?
Sure. My name is Greg Harned. I have experience across various areas of IT, most recently in the information management discipline with enterprise architecture. My background includes building, I think I counted last week, Mike, I think it was something like 7 or 8 different enterprise architecture organizations from scratch, and restarted about 3 or 4. So I've got experience in various disciplines of enterprise architecture, but again, most recently in the information management space. So thank you for having me today, by the way, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the conversation today that I wanted to talk about was senior executives and information management. It's very difficult to engage the senior leadership in conversations. So why is that when they continue to talk about things like consumer-centric data and the need to consolidate systems and the need to get rid of old systems and bring new systems from merging companies into the fold, but yet most executives see data architecture from a distance, including IT executives, because they haven't grown up with a data focus. They grew up with an application focus throughout their careers, and the data was just something that kind of hung on the end of the applications. Now when they're trying to consolidate these systems, when they're trying to change the user interfaces, they really don't understand how data architecture and, in fact, information management and information systems architecture really fits within that conversation. So they're stuck with this 1980s lexicon that's used very widely at senior executive levels, including from the business executives talking to the IT executives, because the way that they understand it is, you know, I have this group that continues to come in and tag on to my projects. They might be called information management, they might be called data management teams, they might be called enterprise information management, enterprise architecture information management. They don't know who these groups are, but they continue to, you know, tap onto the programs and increase the cost of the programs, but they don't really understand what those teams are doing for them in those programs. Most executives really understand the broader products and services and what's happening in the marketplace, but they really lack an understanding of technology struggles to bring these systems together and to be responsive to new programs. They see IT as being very expensive and really lacking the ability to fully deliver their needs with the given cost and time constraints. So this is really how senior executives see the world. They think about decision criteria around people and strategy. You know, how many people do I need in which location? What's my strategy
Greg?
in the marketplace?
Greg?
Yes.
We're seeing your PowerPoint screen, not your presentation screen. So I think we may be seeing the wrong window.
Oh, here, 1 second. let's just... There, is that showing?
Yep. So it might be worth giving folks a chance just to read through that, just to make sure they're.
Cool.
I know you talked through all this slide, but give them just a second.
Yep, sure. Oops, we'll back up 1 second. There we go. So here what I was really trying to address is executives' view of quote-unquote data architecture is really, they're just an expensive group that doesn't really do anything to speed up my project. They don't do anything to make it more timely. They really see IT as a whole as lacking the ability to deliver fully to their needs. So that's really what this slide was intended to show. Okay, so when they start talking about business, when IT and senior business executives start talking, they start talking about, do we have the right people? Do we have the right training in place? Do we have the right locations for those people? What's our strategy in the marketplace? How do we reduce our expenses and increase our revenue? What's the cash plan? And then they start talking about execution. But when they talk about execution, it's really around which projects and programs can I afford to execute this year? And then more importantly, what can the organization deliver? So I've seen many times where senior executives have, a quote-unquote pile of cash that they're ready to spend, but they lack the execution side, either on the business side with the inability to develop requirements fast enough so that IT understands what to do, or on the IT side, purely from a volume perspective or complexity perspective, they have a lack of ability to execute. So the senior executive's perception is there are delivery issues and I can never get IT to respond quickly to my needs. So when they look at projects, they look at it in a traditional way: time, cost, and quality in order to deliver. So why do we need to add those data people onto each project? They're not really needed. We don't impact them on these projects by default, because we're not really sure what they do. And even project and program managers often have a hard time understanding what information architects do. And so there's also a lack of systems thinking. So there might be a program to modify one core system, but they don't understand the upstream and downstream impacts of making those changes. So which other systems are affected? Which reporting systems are affected? How is the business intelligence organization going to consume new data, or changes that are made to the data structure, and how are they going to have a linear view of what's happened over time in the marketplace? So the basics are really missed, and the interfaces that need changing are missed often. So there's really a lack of enterprise architecture integrated communications. And what I mean by that is even sometimes the application architects don't necessarily talk to the information architects. And sometimes those organizations don't talk to the program management organizations, much less the broader project organization. So people talk about, I need to update my data model in order to incorporate this new system. And the response is, what's that? And the afterthoughts comment that I have here under execution really addresses there's impacts to reporting, to mobile applications, to financial reporting, and there's also impacts to service-oriented architecture that need to be taken into account when you start talking about modifying the data layer itself. So the perspectives that the executives have are called out here in this cheeky cartoon, and I'll let you read through this, but think about this as the executive being on the left and the project team being the rest of the concentric circle. So oftentimes the executive feels like they're communicating that they would like to consider different options, and what happens is they're coming back and told you can't have a certain option when there was really no exploration done. So the telephone game, as you look at this, think about information architecture and how the executive is communicating to a portfolio management team to change a project to include changes to the ancillary systems, as an example. And as that project team is communicating to the application architect or to the program manager who's in charge of that specific project or interface, how that communication gets lost when they talk to the information architect, and how that data then gets translated into changes for reporting, BI, analytics downstream. And the whole desire for what the business was trying to attain can get lost in this telephone game. So people really need to focus on their project engagement practices to fix this. I know in my experience, one of the things that I did was I mandated that the information architects on my team sat in on every single project review that the business did. So anytime a new project was being launched, we had a process called the feasibility process, and the information architects would sit in on that feasibility meeting because the business person was talking to the IT program management team to say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. So by eliminating all of these steps around the telephone game and getting information architects at the table to discuss this with the business, to understand what the business is trying to attain, it resulted in a slightly longer cycle to get the project underway. So I would say very minimal, an hour, 2 hours of extra time or delays in scheduling that meeting. But once those meetings happened, delivery happened much quicker. So the feedback loop that was built between the business person and the information architect was a not dotted line. It was a direct line at that point, and that really eliminated a lot of the problems business saw with delivery after the system changes were done. So in other words, when they started seeing their reports, when they started seeing the operational changes that needed to take place. So I put some teaser questions at the bottom here. When's the last time the C-suite really received an information management's 3-year strategic plan? One of the things that I built for an organization most recently was, what is the 3-year strategic plan for data? How are we going to make data the focus so that all of these applications that need consolidation or remediation, all of that can happen at a different layer, but the data itself doesn't change drastically? And we built a data strategic program roadmap, so a 3-year plan that had numbers in it that showed this is the cost of doing this type of consolidation work, and allowed the business to understand the changes to data that needed to happen before changes to the application or during those application changes if necessary, in order to build a foundation so that they can make the changes they wanted more quickly. So I'm going to pause here for a moment with this teaser question and ask anyone in the audience that can pipe up or would like to pipe up and say, we have an information management strategic plan, or we don't. Is there any feedback that anyone in the audience would have for that?
So I'll start. The organizations that I've seen, I've not seen an information management 3-year strategic plan. I have seen a corporate information architecture, but that's really been the extent of it in kind of this direction. Obviously, there's been some work done on data management in general, but the kind of strategic plan you're talking about, I've not seen anybody that really has that. And I've actually not seen a lot of organizations that even have, if we apply our thinking, I've not seen a lot of organizations that even have a business architecture around information management. Some do, but not a tremendous number. So.
Mike, this is Chandra. So I will add to that, basically, as from Nationwide Insurance, we do actually, we have a lot of focus from leadership and a lot of buy-in from leadership to work on data management. So we have created a whole organization focused on data management. It's called DMNA, Data Management and Analytics. We recently, or basically a couple of years ago, hired a chief data officer. So there's a lot of focus from definitely within Nationwide. I think the challenge is in the execution. So we have a good reference architecture, we have a very good plan, but when it comes to execution, it goes back to a lot of challenges. What is the business value of doing all those? And that's where basically it kind of it falls apart, right? So we have this good plan, good strategic roadmap that we will consolidate everything, but when it comes to funding of those projects, that's where it falls. Okay, so what is the business value? Because it's everything, it's very hard to provide kind of associate business value directly to those projects which are totally heavily focused on data and analytics effort. It takes time, right? It's not immediate value. Once you consolidate everything, once you have all those capability in place, then business will be able to do this, but business doesn't see that value coming in right away. And we have been having challenges with the time to deliver, right? Anytime business asks, well, I need this data for this reporting or this analytics, it takes months for IT to deliver all this data from starting from data files to loading to stage in one area, then going to data warehouse, then to data mart, then to business object. There's so many layers, like till business gets that data in their hand. So I mean, that's basically that's what kind of our challenge is currently. So I will stop there and kind of ask others to chime in and see what other organizations are doing to solve those kind of problems. Those problems.
Anyone else? So Chandra, that's a really interesting perspective. One of the first things that I did when I took over the information management discipline was I went out and interviewed all of the business stakeholders and said, can you give me examples of issues that you've had with data that have affected your business, either revenue or expense side of the business? And I linked data problems to financials, which allowed the business people to see that I was really listening in their terms, in their language, which was, you know, the business of making money, right? And once I linked it, then they started saying, so what are you going to do about it? And so the teaser was actually interviewing the business stakeholders at a very high level. This is senior EVPs and senior VPs, in order to find out what they saw as the major data problems. And then I started linking the reason why that couldn't be delivered to an information roadmap. So you don't have master data management, and therefore this is the problem you're having on your reporting and analytics side, right? And so it takes longer to gather this information, to report on this information, because you're lacking an end-to-end view of the consumer and the life cycle of the consumer through the product lines. So once we started linking the data problems they were having to how that might be solved through IT, and to be honest, I spent a significant amount of time educating senior executives on what MDM was, on what a data model was, on why these various systems couldn't, you know, in their view it's pretty simple, right? You have these two systems. I was also in an insurance industry. So these two systems do claims processing. Why can't we just get rid of one, right? Why does copy and paste the data from one to the other and move on, right, is the way the business person thinks about it. But once you start educating them on what is a data model, what is master data management, how would you build a landing zone for data to quickly get at it, but it's not scrubbed, it's not clean, it's not, it's in a data lake form. Once those conversations started to happen at those senior executives level, and they got educated on what those systems were that they needed to do, then I actually saw them putting some of those programs on their business roadmaps and funding those activities. So Yeah, no, thank you for sharing. All right, let's go on to the next slide. So business and executive impacts. The impacts of those business people and frankly senior IT executives in some cases not really understanding what these new ideas are, the Internet of Things, big data, machine learning, chief data officers, consumerism, the impact of those people not understanding what these terms really mean, but they sound like a fast sports car to them, right? This is my silver bullet. If I just get big data, then I'll have all the reports I need, at my fingertips. I can get there, right? If I just had, um, you know, data coming off of devices, and I had this Internet of Things information, then I'd understand my consumerism strategy better, and I'd be able to go after that. So they start catching on to some of the buzzwords and maybe loosely understanding these terms, but they really don't understand what it means. And not only that, in many cases, machine learning has been around, in various phases for decades. And chief data officers, the need for a chief data officer highlights the fact that an organization has significant data problems, but creating one role isn't going to fix those data problems, right? You need a consolidated effort and a strategy from an IT and a business side on how you're going to manage that data, improve data quality, etc. So really, my perspective on this, or one perspective is, are these things really new? Are they a change in magnitude, or are they just visible now to executives who have started getting closer and closer to their data and further away from that application-centric view of the world and closer to the data and reporting and analytics side? And I think it might be a combination, but I wanted to throw it out there. It might just be that some of these executives are learning as they go. So one of the things that I did during my time in leading the information management organization at a Fortune 6 organization was to really focus on, every time I got base time with senior executives, I would address their questions. I would provide their status updates that they requested, and I would address their questions. But really, I focused on change management to bring them along in the journey of where we are as an IT organization in addressing information management practices and principles. And yes, there are some new toys and some new things that can help us with, big data and the Internet of Things, and information is flowing, but it's not permeable in the organization. So bringing them along in that journey and articulating that it's not a silver bullet, it's more of a journey, and we're moving closer and closer to that data and a little farther away from that application-centric view of the world, was the way that I was able to get funding to address major spend items that previously could not get funded. So the question, the teaser that I want to lay out for you is, what will you do as enterprise architects, and how will you adjust course? How will you begin to change the company culture to focus on information management? Because sitting back and saying those executives don't understand, it takes this long to make this stuff happen, that's great. But if you engage them and educate them and help them understand in their terms, strategy, people, execution, and cash, exactly what you're trying to accomplish and why it's important as a foundational principle to move them forward in getting to their long-term goals, is really something that will help the organization as a whole and the culture as a whole to move forward. So with that, are there any questions?
So any questions for Greg?
This is Chandra again, Greg. So I will ask one question regarding, so the challenge, as I said, the time to delivery is really a challenge in data space, I guess, for all the organization. And IT as a whole, it seems like it. It takes a lot of time before business gets anything out of IT. So as far as related to data, going forward, I mean, we are looking into this concept called exploration zone. So putting all the data in the hand of business right away, right? So giving them tool and space, a sandbox kind of area where business can go and look at the data in raw form, right? As the files coming or data is streaming data or any kind of Excel spreadsheet, anything they want to look at, they can pull and basically start exploring that data right away, right? And then deciding what do they need, and if they decide that yes, they know what data they need, what kind of a data transformation they need in order to get this particular reporting or particular statistics, and then IT can take that and basically kind of execute that or implement that to get it into the data warehouse and data mart. I'm just wondering, is that concept anywhere else? How do you see others solving this problem, time to delivery problem for getting data into hand of business rather than IT taking their own time, analyzing and creating data model, and basically we lose the value and business doesn't see the value till because it's taking so much time and business lose the interest. I'm just wondering, have you seen that being solved and how it's being solved in the industry?
Yeah, Chandra, that's a really, really good question, and it shows that you've thought about this quite extensively. Yes, I have seen that, and yes, we solved for it. The way that we solved for it was we once we started having a conversation about data, so you can't walk in and have this conversation right away with business people or with senior IT executives. But once you've started the journey and started educating them and they're starting to engage, then you can start saying, so I understand you think your reporting is taking too long to get at these reports or to get at this business intelligence. I want to help you solve for that. So can you assign a small group of people from the business side to attend a daily meeting where we're going to talk about this and we're going to get takeaways out of every single meeting, and just like an agile project, we're going to do something, right? And let's just do an experiment and let's work on that. So I'll dedicate some IT expertise to this, you dedicate some business expertise to this, and let's sit down and see if we can solve for it. And the minute that we got that sounds like a good idea, we really time on doing this, right? Once I got that partnership with the business, that was the immediate win. What it developed into was instead of being an IT order-taking organization that was delivering reports or delivering data to the business or delivering interfaces to the business, instead of being that delivery organization and being order takers, we took it up a notch and said, we're going to partner with you. So we can go get this data out of this company we just acquired, right? We can take all of their systems and literally within 3 days, we will copy their entire system of record over to a landing zone, Hadoop, by the way, and we'll pull that data into Hadoop and we'll put it there. And then you can look at it right away. And of course, the business is going, really, I can have the data in 3 days? You're like, yes, but it's in raw form. And so you're going to have some data people on your side and tools to go look at that data. And then once they bought into that concept that, oh, it's raw data, it's not organized in a way that I can go get it, there's no data dictionary, there's no rationalization of the data at all. Then they started looking at the data going, well, what I really need is this report to match up and include this data. Well, great. How important is that project compared to this other project that we're working on, compared to this other one? So then you start having the question of prioritization of their reports, and you put the decisioning in the business hands. And they can then see what's happening, right? It's more transparency. And once we built that transparency and said, look, we have this large organization over here delivering to your data needs, they'll do whatever you want. You just need to tell us which one's the most important item. That's how we overcame that perception and started delivering more tactically to the business needs.
Well, thanks for sharing it. Thank you.
So Nathan, not to put you on the spot, but how how do you look at data and information architecture and data management at Honda? All right, Nathan is on mute or not on the call anymore, so maybe I'll ask John. John, would you mind sharing a little bit of kind of what you guys have seen? How you look at this? All right, John's apparently not interested in sharing either. John, the Vantive story? All right. Let's try one more. Jensen, would you be interested in sharing anything that you've seen from your perspective? Very talkative bunch today. All right, let's try another one. Tim and George, you guys work with a lot of different customers. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about some of the different things you see?
Well, Tim here. Hello, everyone. I'll talk about it in a second, but I have a question I'm interested in Greg and anyone else's perspective on. I have my own, of course, but I'm interested to hear what other people say. What do you think is the value, if any, of differentiating between information and data? You know, whether you're trying to differentiate the difference between those things as terms or assets, or even if you're trying to differentiate information architecture from data architecture.
Yeah, so I can address that. By design, throughout this presentation, including the title, I mixed and matched my terms, and I did that as a teaser for those who have thought about this, right? So the more academic answer, I guess, is, you know, data architecture is much more about the data itself, and information architecture is more about, and information management practices, and in fact, are the much more broader scope of how the data is used and managed, and how quality is maintained, etc. I would say that that's an academic answer, and frankly, a lot of the data architects that I hired and that were on my team got stuck on those terms. When I engaged the business executives, which is where I was trying to make the most difference, what ended up happening was I used whatever term they wanted to use, but I talked about it holistically as an asset of the company and how it should be managed in a different way, and how not managing it for decades has caused all the problems, and the growth in the data that we're not just gathering but consuming is going to get to a point, if it hasn't already in many companies, where it just sits there on, you know, spindles and doesn't get consumed or used by the business. And so I tried to use the terms in whatever way they were comfortable with it, just so that we could have the conversation from wherever they were in their journey.
Yeah, I think generally we can probably all, you know, kind of agree on the differentiation between information and data. I'm kind of interested in whether or not people are finding any value in differentiating them. And similar to what you've said, you know, I think, you know, usually the best course of action if you're helping somebody get started is kind of, you know, use what they're comfortable with. But in some instances, George and I have found it advantageous to push it a little bit when you're in a situation where the business doesn't want to take any ownership. Either you've got executives that are, just far removed, or you're in an area, a company that's, very autonomous lines of business, and they all feel like they own the information, that's a big part of their business unit, but they really kind of wash their hands of any responsibility for it. We've found that might be a situation where it's advantageous to kind of draw the line in the sand between information being the responsibility of the business and data being the responsibility of IT as the caretakers, if you will. This is the atomic stuff. You help us, with kind of defining the rules of what these atomic things can be, what's allowable, where they should come from. But when it comes to how this is put together and used for business purposes, whether they're operational or decision support oriented, we need that leadership, that drive to come from the business. How would you guys react to that?
So I can speak, but I'm actually interested if somebody else in the audience has a perspective first. So I'll open it up first.
Yeah, this is Scott Sloan. I will offer a perspective here. I think in past decades, I think the differentiation between data and information was more prevalent. But I've been surprised in the last couple of years to see a resurgence of it. So I'm not sure I'm addressing the question directly, but talking about the resurgence, the place that I've seen it in particular is all around the Internet of Things. So where you've got data that's streaming in from multiple devices. So whether it's an engine that is streaming diagnostic data off it, or a set of medical devices that are bringing forth measurements, I've seen the differentiation come in from the data that is coming off all of the devices, meaning I'm collecting it, but I've not necessarily done anything with it yet. And then the differentiation between the information that I'm deriving from that, as I do take you in a stream-based mechanism or some type of analysis approach, where I specifically go out and take a set of that data and perform some analytics on it. And aligned with that, I've seen the resurgence of the data-rich but information-poor moniker that has also been used in past decades. So that's one of the big areas that I've seen, less that the business are not necessarily taking responsibility for it, but more along the lines of there are new incremental sets of data that are being collected today that aren't necessarily managed in the way that we've had them in the past. And that kind of influx in those new data sets, I think, has made people think a lot more about the fact that, maybe we're not getting all the insights or the information that we need out of the data that we're actually collecting. So like I said, I'm not sure I really answered your question as it relates to the governance aspects of being able to have people who are managing the data. But I've been surprised at the resurgence that's come from the whole Internet of Things trend and connected devices.
So this is Chandra. I will provide my perspective. So academically, definitely we all agree difference between data and information. Data is in raw form information, which makes sense. Basically, you are getting conclusion out of that data. Going back to who owns the data versus information, I guess as we are moving towards this big data, Hadoop, and those technology where business is getting access to raw data right away, basically they are playing around the data and getting the information out of it. I don't think so separating or creating a kind of a separation between IT versus business, who manages what will help. I guess there has to be a collaboration, because we are at the stage where business has direct access to the raw data. So we cannot say that IT will be managing only the data part of it and business, you you manage the information part of it. It has to be collaborated effort, basically collaboration between those two, and tight collaboration basically in this space. So information and data both has to be managed by both. Ultimately, yes, from the ownership, I guess, what value we need out of the data, yeah, business has to provide that, then only IT can work with. But this is my perspective, creating a separation between those two might not help. That's my perspective.
Yeah, and this is Jensen Wong. Sorry, I didn't able to respond earlier because I couldn't figure out how to unmute my computer.
No
but,
problem.
I do agree with I do agree with Chandra. Because I myself is in IT, and I try a couple of times to convince the business side to do something with the data, but I do feel it's not only the business driving on the how to fix the data problem. It's more, I would say this is more a collaborations, because IT should help the business to figure out the benefit. Just like if I'm driving a car and I'm not a mechanical engineer, I have a hard time understanding how the engine profile affecting how I drive my car. So data might be too much in depth under the hood that average business people, they might not have much, or they don't quite understand what it affects in terms of the business benefit. So the way I kind of feel like we should tackle is give them some metrics. I'm more working right now with the team to figure out how we assess the quality of the data by assessing it different metrics against the CMMI standard. So 1 to 5, how good it is in different perspective, and that might be easier to digest by the business. And as well, I do feel what we really need is to deliver the capability to the business. It's more a joint venture because just by talking, escalating the problem, it might not able to figure out what would be the solution. So everybody need to be more proactive in driving the solutions and how to provide the capability to the business.
Yeah, this is Scott again. So a follow-up comment to that, because I do think the partnership between IT and business is absolutely one of the keys behind this. I think that 15 or 20 years ago, we got pretty good in the data world of inserting the concept of data stewards, and in driving some of that, it's almost the analyst or the data analyst role, that position that sits a little between the business and IT to help with that aspect. I think we got pretty good at data stewarding for a period, and one of the things that I've found surprising as master data management has gone up, kind of to your comments about the fact that, you know, the data quality is becoming important or increasingly important, as a part of master data management needing that constant review of the data to assure that the master data really is correct and anything that doesn't quite match is managed. I think we did a really good job of identifying that need, but my experience has been that a lot of companies manage that process of looking at the data that doesn't quite match or falls out of the mastering process. They don't do a really good job of that, and I've been kind of surprised. Because we brought up the point at the start here, the difference between master data and other types of data, and explaining to the business why that's important. I wonder if this kind of fallout in stewardship of data is primarily related to the fact that the business just has more on their plate and they really don't understand the value in doing that. I don't know, but your comments about the partnership there between IT and business, I think you're absolutely right, are critical.
I think if you if you summarize and you pull together everything that all the participants on the call have stated around this subject, it really comes down to, if you reduce it down and boil it down, it comes down to transparency is what drives the activity to clean the data and to ensure that the executives understand that they need to manage that data. And let's face it, business operations people have enough to do. They're busy. And so going to them and asking them to do one more function that doesn't yield $1 in savings, a new insight directly, or $1 in revenue is just too much for them to tackle. So they need to see the benefit, the business benefit of doing it, and then they'll tackle it. Whether that be through the Internet of Things, as one gentleman mentioned on the call today, whether that be through transparent reporting of the data itself, through statistics. I heard someone say, show them how bad their data is. Shaming them into data quality, yeah, I'm not below that. So, I've shown statistics about reports around data to senior executives, and it's not in an attempt to poke fingers at anyone. It's in an attempt to say, you can have better data if you would desire it. If you need this going forward, you need to start a program now, because it's going to take you a year to 2 years to clean up this whole data set through various automated and manual processes. And so having the conversation, having the engagement, having the transparency about what happens and why it takes so long, it really is about that end-to-end conversation with the business executives and the managers of the data itself that will drive the agenda forward. Again, just my opinion, but I think it's been validated by some of the comments here. Anything else anyone would like to add? Okay. Mike, I think I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I think before we move off of this topic of information architecture, and again, sorry to put you on the spot, Jerry, do you have anything you want to share about what P&G is doing? I know you've been working on some interesting stuff there from a standpoint of really looking at a strategic architecture for information. Can you share anything there?
Sure. This was an area where we were probably, of the domains, this is the one we've had the least work done prior to the last year, so it was pretty lacking, and we've experienced a lot of the data kind of quality problems that you guys were discussing earlier. So in about the last year and a half, we've started making inroads on that. We do have an updated 3-year plan on what we're doing with data strategy. It kind of knits together some of the thoughts we've had, but actually tying it to some of the work that's going on. So what we've been building is trying to find a way to connect our metadata about applications and about business processes through using and by defining what those data elements are. So basically we've built a hierarchy of data elements, and we use Mega as our repository to keep all of our information about our applications and everything. So within Mega we've got this hierarchy now, and we're trying to make connections between our business processes and our data models and our applications to try to build out that picture, that visualization of how the data is flowing through the system and where it connects. Because as you've mentioned, not understanding where your data is going downstream and who's consuming it, not necessarily understanding where it's coming from, then any changes that you make, you have no idea what kind of impact you're having, really, until somebody starts screaming. So we're trying to build up a way of visualizing that picture. And at the same time, we're also doing more building a data governance organization to help us manage, and what should our data standards be, what should our data quality issues, where are they, what are the procedures for dealing with that. So those things are kind of going on concurrently. We've also building up a data dictionary that's actually gone live now that is also connected to that hierarchy. So it's not 100% complete. These are all things we're building up, but the idea is to have an easy, simple way to visualize where your data is at, who owns it, where it's coming from, where it's going. That's kind of what we've been working on. It's still a work in progress. There's lots of work to do, but we're at least making a headroad into it and trying to address some of those issues you've been talking about.
Hey, Chandra, just curious, the ultimate goal of this hierarchy you're building is for the impact analysis perspective or something else?
Yes, absolutely, and visualization and understanding. So knowing if I've got a project coming in, definitely impact analysis is number one, but also even just understanding where it goes and who you're impacting and who you need to talk to. And one of the big things that we've run into is a lot of times is just finding out who owns something. Mm-hmm. Because then you spend 2 weeks trying to track somebody down and the name you have has gone on to another role or whatever else. And so establishing ownership is a big piece of it as well.
Thanks.
Great. Any other last comments from anyone on this topic?
Jerry, the one thing, after we implemented a similar program, the one thing that I would say was the biggest challenge was keeping people's attention over time and knowing that a certain definition may have been put in, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and it hasn't been updated or maintained, and in fact it's not in use. So figuring out how do you keep it alive is a huge challenge, so good luck with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of the way we're going to address that is by tying it in with projects as they go online and as they do new releases. That's part of their stage gate deliverables, is to get that information updated. So that's not completely in place yet either, but that's one way we want to address it. But yeah, that is a huge thing. And that is kind of always the argument. It's got to be whatever visualization tools we have to be valuable enough and usable enough that people want to maintain and make sure that the information in there is correct. So if it's just something they have to do, it's going to get put off to the last and then not happen, right? Just like you said. But if we visualize it well enough and make it where it's something that they use and it's important to them, then they're more likely to be willing to invest the time to keep it current. But yeah, it's a huge issue.
Great. Thanks for sharing, everyone. This has been a really nice discussion. So, Scott, are you still on the phone? Scott Sloan? All right, so apparently Scott has dropped off. Either that or he can't figure out how to work the mute button. So we'll go ahead and wrap up here. Before we close out the session today, I did want to thank everyone for joining. This is part of the Association of Enterprise Architects Ohio chapter. And we have now had our steering team in place coming up on 2 years this January. So as a steering team, we've been talking about it being really the right time for us to offer up the opportunity for other folks to get involved with the chapter and join the steering team and potentially take one of the leadership roles. So we have 3 leadership roles, I believe, and gentlemen, correct me if I'm misstating any of this. But I think we've got a chair or president and a vice chair or vice president role, and then we have a secretary role. I believe there's only 3. Is that correct, Chandra, or am I missing one?
Yes, no, that's correct. I think those 3 behind.
So we have 3 formal roles, and then we actually have 7 or 8 people that are part of our steering committee that are actually coordinating speakers, identifying topics, setting up all the logistics for the meetings that we bring you each quarter. So very fortunate to have those folks like Chandra, who is our vice chair, and Scott, who is our secretary. I don't see any of the rest of our leadership team, but we have folks like John Kresick, Wojtek. I'm drawing a blank on Wojtek's last name. I don't have his email in front of me. So, but Wojtek and a number of other folks that have been active participants, really helping bring this to life for you. You will see over email a kind of a call for nominations. If you would like to be one of the 3 chapter officers, we will be taking nominations and would like to submit for a vote at our next meeting. And if you would like to be a part of the steering committee, we're trying to actually get some additional folks involved in our steering committee going forward. So we'd love to talk to you about what that looks like if you're interested in being involved in leadership within the chapter. So I'll leave it there for any questions that folks may have about that. If not, you can look for the follow-up email that will put the formal call for nominations out. Any final questions? All right. We did have a last-minute cancellation on our other speaker slots, so that is all we have for you today. Thanks for joining us, and we will make the recording available afterwards. Special thanks to Greg for facilitating a very nice conversation today. So thanks for joining us, Greg, and thanks for all who participated.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.
Thank you.